My name is Scott Cooney. I started Clean Technica to promote clean energy and other sustainable alternatives, and for 13 years we've been moving markets. If we had a nickel for every time someone told us they bought their first EV, solar, e-bike, or fill in the blank clean energy solution, we'd be a cable TV channel by now. But we don't get those nickels. So unfortunately, we could use your help to reach a few more people. If just 1% of our audience chipped in a few bucks a month, we could hire dozens of great journalists and promote all sorts of climate solutions. It's easy. Just go to cleantechnica.com/support and sign up with a credit card in seconds. Cancel anytime. But we'll be sending out some cool perks too, so I think you'll want to stick around. With your support, we'll keep leading the charge. Thank you so much.
Welcome back. It is September 18th, and this is EV Obsession, your number one source for EV daily news. I'm your host, Joe Boris, joined as ever with Clean Technica CEO Zachary Shahan. How was your weekend, man? Get any good tennis in?
Good, yeah. A little bit, then I got rained out, but I've got like a back thing, so I'm not feeling great. So yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah,
you'll be fine.
I'm excited for Monday morning news, for EV news. And there's a lot to
Yeah,
talk about as always, but the first thing I've got here is well, people I think are familiar probably with the Wuling Mini EV that was just busting sales records for a long time. I think it's sold over 1 million vehicles by now. It sort of, as Jose Pontes, who does our EV sales reports, indicated, it sort of created a new category of vehicle in China, and then just dominated that for a while until others started coming along. Now it still sells a lot, but there's other competing small EVs that are and I know there's always been small EVs, but it's something about this kind of cute small EV with decent enough range that's really cheap. But now that there's competitors, and it's not the only one, so it's not so dominant. It's not like one or two on the China and world EV sales reports anymore. But it has a new innovation. It's actually the SAIC GM Wuling joint venture has a new innovation, a new model, the E10 Wuling E10 Mini delivery vehicle.
yeah, this is a great product. So I really love what Psych GM is doing with this Wuling Mini, because it really is like a modern take on the original Mini Cooper, which was all about this kind of miraculous packaging where they fit the ability to have four people in the smallest exterior vehicle footprint possible. And the current lineup of Mini Cooper has sort of gone away from that. They pay homage to that with the styling of it and kind of bringing back visual cues of the original Mini. But this is very much like that. It is super ultra tiny, and it's been incredibly popular, low price, high quality. And now with this little trucklet version, this delivery vehicle, it is really giving small businesses, delivery fleets, something that is useful, that can go in and out of alleyways in China, that could be used in many different ways in cities. And I would love to see this in Europe. I know that eventually it's going to get there, and it's going to be a phenomenal product. This is going to take over the same market that the Vespa Ape or the Piaggio Ape is, the tuk tuks in India. This goes right into that. And the thing about it that cracks me up the most is, we talk about all these SUVs and sport utility vehicles, right? Whether we're talking about the Ford Explorer or the Chevy Blazer, whatever it is, this actually has significantly more cargo room and payload than those vehicles do, despite the fact that it's on a smaller footprint. Yeah, these
Yeah,
are great pictures.
yeah, they have good photos. Yeah, I love that you said I hope this is going to come to Europe. I'm looking forward to just getting to Europe. Joe's like, no mention of the US, because sadly this is not a vehicle that's gonna penetrate the US market, but it
I
could be
don't see
huge
it.
in Europe, could be huge in China. It's just really again, hyper low cost, efficient electric vehicle that, I mean, I think if it wasn't for the original the Mini EV being such a humongous success and them producing so many of them, this might not be so intriguing. Be like, oh, that's cool, but what, they're gonna sell like 50,000. But knowing how many they've sold of the Mini EV, you're like, okay, they're going to push this. How many are they going to sell? 1 million, 2 million?
Yeah.
And it can really, one of the wonderful things about it is it can displace really polluting vehicles that are idling a lot, sitting oversized for city deliveries. So I find it really just, of course, again, it's really cute. And you can never see it happen, it being popular in the US for companies in the US. But I think in Europe and China, you could really see companies jumping on this and saying, yeah. One note from the writer Ramiridzai, he pointed out that it has in these pictures the red logo, and that's what they use for domestic Chinese EV models. If they're exporting a model, they make it silver or gray, I think. And so that's sort of hints that this is for the Chinese market, but of course it can always be then once they've got production and sales up, they can always start selling it globally as well.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm really excited about this. I don't see something like this becoming really popular in the US. You'll see things, you know, there used to be the GEM, the neighborhood electric vehicle. Wave is now manufacturing those, and those are, they have waves of the popularity of those sort of comes and goes. They're very popular in like beach towns in South Florida. But something like this that's really practical, but that is not about status, I don't see the American companies jumping all over this. I think this will succeed in markets like Asia, like Europe, like Africa, that are not based on this idea of easy credit and financing, where you actually kind of have to have the money to buy one of these things. And if you look at a company like Ford or GM, they would rather sell you a much more profitable F-150 or Silverado on a 7-year payment with 7.5% or 9% interest rate at a reasonable, maybe not reasonable, but at a payment that you can probably make. They'd rather sell you that all day long than something like this that you can get for 10 grand. It's just how we operate as an American culture, and that'll come up again over and over as we talk about EVs and the transition there. There's another,
but note, this is a GM joint venture producing this, so GM could easily go. And looking at this picture, couldn't you imagine a ton of hipsters just loving this and selling stuff out of it? Like,
absolutely.
Are hipsters still a thing? Do they still exist?
Yeah, they're millennials now. Now they're elder millennials. They have kids. They go to the but absolutely they are. So, but you talk about the joint ventures, a very popular thing in China. This one, the Geely is a joint venture with Geely and Volvo. So Geely, obviously the Chinese company that manufactures cars. This is a little tiny off-road focused EV. And what I love about this is two things. Number one, it is small, it is cute, it is great, but it's still playing on this overlanding off-road trend, which is like red hot right now. If you go to SEMA, all the trucks are lifted and they've got roof tents and racks and everything else. And much like the Land Rover Defenders and Jeep Wranglers that you see driving around with stuff like this will never go off-road. And what I love about this is it's got the look, it's got the playfulness, it's got the attitude of all those things, but they don't even pretend that it's going to actually go off-road.
Look at those wheels.
Four-wheel drive. Yeah, it's not four-wheel drive. The wheels are all wrong. It's got, low rolling resistance tires. It's such a fun little thing. And this is one that breaks my heart, right? Because this could come to this country as, they could sell it in like Volvo stores or Polestar stores under some kind of different brand. Maybe bring back the Saab name for something little like this, but some little goofy car like this in the same size market as like the Fiat 500 or, the old Geo Metro styled like this. I don't think you could keep these out of them. Like my daughter would have 6 of these things by the time she graduated high school. She's like, I can't imagine anyone not wanting one of these. There would be lunatics lining up to put off-road AT tires on them and go off-road in them, see where they would go. You would see these all over college campuses. This would be like the new Barbie mobile. And if they had any sense at all, they'd paint it hot pink. This thing is just awesome. It doesn't matter that it can't go off-road or can't tow or has bad range. That's not why you'd buy this. This is just phenomenal.
I thought it was funny to get ready for the show. Our first story, both of us, was a Mini EV, from
From
China.
China.
So I had that.
But that makes sense because the time zone thing, and time zones baffle me. I don't understand time zones at all. But I do know that when I wake up on Monday morning, it does seem like China has had a full day of work
Oh
already.
yeah,
It
exactly.
feels like Chinese
But
Tuesday.
we had the whole weekend. I think it was just also just they're cute, they're attractive, they're like, they're low cost, so
Yeah.
they're exciting a bit. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what the market is for this. It is weird to me that it's an off-road vehicle that's not an off-road vehicle. It's got all these little things on it, but then it's got these tiny tires, and it's.
Yeah. But there's a
But at the
lot of
same time,
those. That's what the American crossover SUV market is now. It's vehicles that used to be cars, right? Like
and
it would
and
have been a car 20 years ago, but now we're calling it a truck and it looks like a station wagon.
well, what I was wondering is, like, does it have a market sort of semi off-road in Asia and Africa, even in South America that's been begging for EVs? Like, I don't know. I'm very curious to see if it really can become a popular product. I think it's funny that the infotainment system is clearly better than anything from legacy US automakers. It's a tiny little EV with tiny wheels, but the infotainment system sure looks good. Like, that's what China does really well. So
Well,
I think
this
that's
is interesting because if you look at that, if you can go back to those images,
this one.
we have not yet seen Volvo Polestar's next generation infotainment. We have heard that they're going to drop
Yeah.
CarPlay, they're going to drop that kind of integration. It's going to be Google based, it's going to be Android based, it's going to feature some Alexa integrations and some other integrations that we haven't, that aren't really popular right now, but we haven't seen it. If you look at this, and Geely has, maintained a very tight association with Volvo and Polestar. If you look at this could be a clue as to what the next generation, the EX30, the EX90 SUV, in infotainment systems are going to look like. And honestly, it looks decent. I think I'd be okay with that. But moving on, I think to the next story. I think we've talked about as much as we can about vehicles that we're never going to drive. EVs are set to surpass 2/3 of global car sales by 2030. This is really interesting because there's interesting phrasing on this. Global car sales. So is that eliminating the category of pickup trucks and commercial trucks, or is that just
No,
saying
no, it's
private
just,
vehicle purchases?
yeah, private vehicle purchases. It's just they're commonly used, what people commonly use for
What they
light
commonly
duty
say, yeah.
light duty vehicles. But yeah, I mean, I think one thing, I mean, there's a lot here, but one thing that I thought about putting it right after the mini EVs is a lot of those are going to be mini EVs. So a lot of those mini EVs, we were thinking of our US market,
Right.
but the US market is not the majority. The Chinese auto market is half the global auto market,
Right.
and
Right.
then you've got other markets as well. So of course that's going to include ID4s, Model 3s, all of that, Ford F-150 Lightnings, but it's also going to include those mini EVs we just saw that are rolling out day after day in China and beyond. But yeah, I mean, I guess one of the things to talk about here is a lot of conventional EV sales forecasts are not that bold. They're constantly pessimistic. They're constantly under forecasting, and like a common target is 50% in 2030.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a significant jump up. 2/3 is 66%, 67%, well above 50%. I think it's from like a conventional source. I think it's the probably the boldest I've seen, the most, the biggest forecast for 2030 at 67%. I don't think I've seen anyone outside of like Clean Technica readership and like and that kind of world suggest forecasts of this high. So I
Well,
think that's a big deal. RMI is a big organization in partnership
yeah.
with Bezos Earth Fund.
Well,
Jeff
that's what I
Bezos.
was going to say. Was there's a specific chart that RMI put out that you and I were talking about last week, and you even made the comment of how do forecasters keep their jobs. That these EV sales forecasts for originally for 2021 from 2016 to 2018 has had to be modified over and over again to go from like this kind of steady growth curve to really an exponential growth curve. And they redid the chart again this year, and I just dropped it in your chat. I don't know if you can share the
Oh,
image from
okay.
there, but it you can start to see that hockey stick kind of growth there, and it's very clear where even their own projections, and this is RMI, right? This is an environmental group that kind of specializes in stuff. Even their projections are not aggressive enough, and you would think that their projections would be so much more aggressive than Ford or GM's. And
Well, I think they sort of,
know,
they're like, I think some people at the organization were like, hey, we got to stop relying on these other organizations and like building ours off of theirs or whatever, or using theirs, because they're constantly wrong. And you can see here what's highlighted is in contrast to this 67% projection, they say that established projections see EVs reaching only 40% market share by 2030. So they're going 67 compared to conventional wisdom of 40%. So yeah,
right.
I think it's, I mean, it's all about battery costs dropping, that kind of thing. But yeah, I can't get to the chat.
There's
Right
also
now.
peer pressure though, right? Because there is this sense of like, you every time you go on the road and you see an electric vehicle, there's something that, especially if you're not in the market, if you're not a automotive person, you're going to see that and go, oh, interesting, that's another EV. Oh, there's another Tesla parked in front of the neighbor's house. Oh, there's another Chevy
Yeah,
Bolt or whatever else. And there's this really good article that I read all the time, not article, statistic that I read all the time that says it takes 3% of a population, effectively 3% of the population, to like revolt to cause a major cultural revolution. And
huh.
we're way beyond the 3% EV level. And there's
Yeah,
so many people, so many stakeholders who don't want it to happen, who keep putting out like fake stuff, whether it's about oil or hydrogen or this and that. There's so many people who are like pushing back against it, and it just doesn't matter, man. Like, we're way beyond the tipping point. We're going EV, certainly for the passenger car market. Like, I don't really foresee electric airliners. I don't really foresee
yeah.
fully electric semi trucks. I know Tesla would disagree with me on that, but that's my own personal take. But
Well,
I go ahead.
the funny thing, what you were talking about a minute ago about people seeing the EVs and then getting on board, for the past year to 2 years, as EVs have gone from this novel niche product around me, like that only like people really clued in who like read Clean Technica and stuff like this know about, to like a really mainstream. I mean, they're not the majority of cars on the road, but everywhere I go, there's a handful of EVs and not just Teslas anymore. So they're just everywhere you look, there's EVs. So I'm constantly thinking for the past year or two, like, how did these people get into getting an EV? Like, how did they convince themselves the range was fine? Because there's always the question people not clued in think about. It's like, is it enough range? Can I charge? There's all this fear. And I was like,
They don't think about that.
how did they get converted? Like, did they just think, oh, that's the hot new technology? Did they have a friend or family member who like informed them of everything? Did they see them on the road? They're like, oh, that's a cool car. I want that.
Yeah.
Like, did they know about the Tesla story and then they decided they want a Tesla, or they want another EV but not a Tesla? Like, I'm super curious, like, how did this process happen? And then how does it keep happening? Because right now it's like, wow, we're selling a lot of EVs, but what about the next group of people? Are they going to be harder to reach? Are they going to be more stubbornly attached to going to the gas station? So I'm constantly thinking about this every day when I'm driving and seeing EVs out on the road and seeing them, more and more of them. So it's really interesting. But I think, like you said, there's a kind of tipping point. Jose
Yeah.
Pontes often refers to the 10% disruption tipping point.
He does. Yeah.
But I think the 3% is about like when the S curve starts to go up, really like turn into a hockey stick, starts to really accelerate. So maybe that's why that 3% is used. But still, you have to get past a certain, like, you have to go up that rise a bit and then get past like the 10%.
Sure. And we're already
You got to
there.
like prove it's like for everybody, basically. But I think
Yeah.
everything, all the signs are that why not?
I think what you're seeing, and I really like this question, right? Because I make this argument all the time. I go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, I think 1999, 2000, when I was in Florida, still working, we had a car that was going to be on the car that we were working on was going to be on the cover of Car and Driver. And we were really psyched about it. We were like, this is a cover car. Everybody's going to know about it. And the owner of the company, this guy, Warren Mills, actually his birthday today. And he's a really smart guy. He always says intelligent things and makes me feel stupid. He said, what's their circulation? I go, what do you mean? He goes, what's their circulation? I said, I don't know. So I looked it up. It's about 1.1 million. And this is like the heyday of print magazine, 1.1 million. And he goes, okay, so the population of the United States is about 330 million people. Let's say it's 300 million. The population, the circulation of Car and Driver is 1 million. So that's 1/3 of 1%. And maybe that 1/3 of 1%, maybe half of them are engaged enough to recognize this thing. So let's come into this with the understanding that 99.9% of people, even after we're on the cover of this magazine, will have no idea who we are.
Yeah.
And I think that we are in that world. We're in that enthusiast world. We're in that forest of information and knowledge. And we hear things from other enthusiasts who can't see the forest for the trees, who say things like, well, range anxiety, we have to get to this point. We have to get to this point before mass adoption. And the reality is that's not how people buy. People buy things because it's cool. People buy things because their neighbor has one. People buy things because on that day, on that Tuesday, they decided it was time to buy a car because they had a funny feeling in their toe. And if you try to like crystallize that down to some kind of logical decision, it'll never work, because there is no logical reason to spend 50 or 70 or 80,000 or $30,000 on a brand new vehicle, regardless of what powers it. So we have to, we have a lot of cultural problems in this country. We have a desire to have big pickup trucks and V8 Mustangs, and we've tied our sense of masculinity to that in the same way that we have an AR-15 or something. But we are also, in the same way that sometimes we're held back by our culture, we can make great advances because of that culture. EVs are new. That makes them the shiny new thing that people want because they are new and shiny. And all of these other supposed obstacles that we put in the way don't matter because people want new and shiny. And I think that's the problem that Tesla's going to have. And that's why they have to keep pulling all these demand levers, because they were new and shiny for 10 years and now they're not.
Yeah, and subsidies like tax credits go a long way too. This picture above is my uncle, and he got an EV basically because his accountant was like, "Hey, you got to take advantage of this tax credit." He's environmentally minded. He's had solar panels on his business roof for decades, but he's very mainstream, like the definition of mainstream. And he was always like, "Oh yeah, I'll get an EV when they're when the big guys are making good ones and then it was like, oh, there's this tax credit I got to take advantage of before it's too late.
It before it's gone.
And man, those things work. Accountants tell you, hey, you should get an EV because you get a $7,500 tax credit, and boom, you go find an EV you want. So those things matter a lot too. I don't want to discuss this. We have other stuff to talk about, but the other thing in the headline here that would put nearly half of oil demand at risk, that is big. So we have to dedicate a whole show to like what's happening geopolitically and economically and just in U.S. politics as oil demand gets put, gets hacked away at. But yeah, this is also a brief one. Jennifer wrote the story: after an embarrassing EV charging fiasco, U.S. feds offer $100 million for state and local government to fix broken charging stations. Busted charging stations. So basically it's $100 million to go to fixing stations, not just
getting them in the ground.
Yeah, not just getting them in the ground.
Well, I mean, this comes back to like all of this issue, like, not to name names, but I know that ChargePoint at one point worked this way, where they would sell you the hardware and you put it in the ground, but they didn't own it or manage it. And, Electrify America did kind of own their station. So they were kind of the best of the rest behind Tesla. But even that, somebody needs to take ownership of these things and run them. And sometimes, you look at like Shell and BP and what they're doing overseas with their, Shell Green Lots, Shell recharge stations, and BP Pulse. And you have to say that like those franchise owners that are owning those systems, that are investing those systems, they have an incentive to keep them up and running. But a lot of businesses just don't care. They're putting these in the ground kind of cynically. And then if it doesn't work, They don't know who to call. Do they call ChargePoint? Do they call Qmerit? Do they call some other installer? Is there another warranty process?
Yeah.
And this
And
is where Tesla's advantage it just comes to the fore, where they really
yeah.
take ownership of the customer experience and make sure their stuff works.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if I mentioned it, but the fiasco she refers to, I guess, when they went on this EV road trip to show off how you could drive around the country in EVs. Apparently, they had someone in a gas car going ahead of them to make sure that they had a spot at each charging station and holding the spot. And there was some situation with them like blocking a spot that someone with a
Yeah.
baby needed to use to charge their EV. So, I mean, that's just a case of they had to do that because the network is not good enough. And if they were just using
Yeah.
Tesla superchargers, which of course they weren't, they wouldn't have to go ahead and make sure they had a station working and available. But anyway, her bigger point is she wants it to be implemented well, and she points out that it looks again like the money is just going to go to state DOTs if they have a plan for it, but it's not clear if there's really strong enough requirements to make sure that they're not broken again a year later, the same station, that they stay not broken. So yeah, that's this
No, I mean, we need to have a much more robust federal system and set of standards, because you're going to have states like Wyoming who wanted to ban the sale of EVs outright. You're going to have these, mental midgets and dinosaurs go out there and they're just going to sabotage it and spend it with their brothers, and they're not going to care. And the levels of anti-EV insanity go way higher than that too, especially in like areas that are pushing oil and natural gas. So I mean, we can get into that at a later date, but I just want to point out here that so much of this just comes from ignorance. And if you had a decent charging app, if you had Charge Hub on there, if you had, Blue Dot's credit card charger up there, if you had ChargeWay, which is my personal favorite, you can see on the ChargeWay app if there's an available station. You can see if the station is up or down live. You can see if there's 8 ports at one station. You can see that 4 of them are available, 4 of them are in use. So I don't understand this sending the car with the internal combustion car ahead. Like, that just speaks to such a deep level of ignorance on the part of the administrators and the people who are legislating this stuff, that like it's just way too far behind. And by the time you get the state level and they're agreeing with their contractors and they're agreeing with their lobbyists, and then it all the way goes up through federal,
yeah.
again, it's a balancing act, right? There's a lot of things that are really good because we have state governments and different cultures in that sense, and then there's a lot of things that get held up, and this is one of them. This is just like,
Yeah, well, I think it's the case they
ridiculous.
really need to find and tap more EV experts, genuine EV experts, to pull into these decisions and these programs.
Yeah, but you
Uh,
can't really even say that, because how many people who are self-proclaimed experts would say, "Oh, you just get on charge, or you just get on PlugShare and see where the charging stations are." And it's like,
yeah, everybody
I don't
uses
want to pick on
PlugShare.
somebody, but PlugShare's trash, dude. It's terrible.
Everybody uses PlugShare, and it
It's
always
the
irks Joe.
worst.
It
Well,
irritates
it
Joe
just
because
doesn't work.
everybody uses it, but
Oh, it's terrible.
I mean, even globally, like people in Europe use it, people in
Absolutely,
Australia use it.
absolutely. No, 100% people use it, and but this is like my
Give your
same argument.
soapbox speech on what you think
No,
should be.
this is just real quick. The problem that I have with it is that it makes it very difficult, or at least in past versions that I've used. Now, admittedly, I haven't used it in like 2 or 3 years. In past versions that I've used, it doesn't have enough of like that live route planning. It doesn't have, that instant sort of like, where if your route is planning and you're going to a specific location, if that station goes offline or the ports aren't available, it's not going to alert you. It's not going to like adjust your route to fix that. I just think that, like, I always say to the father-in-law test, like, for me, if I hopped on PlugShare to go across the country, no problem at all. If I gave that to my father-in-law, I don't know, he'd be dead in 5 hours.
All right, so we've also got some bit of Porsche EV fan news, Joe.
Yeah, Porsche did some fun stuff this weekend. So obviously they didn't do this. This was Motor One. They took these pictures. They were able to get some spy shots of the inside of Porsche's new electric Boxster. This is kind of their true sports car, their track day car. their smallest, mid-enginiest, lightweightiest, go fast thing. This is probably the closest thing to a Tesla Roadster that we're going to have in the next 10 years or 5 years at least. Unless, you know, Elon really surprises everybody and comes out with a production Roadster out of nowhere. But this is that same kind of like low slung, low center of gravity sporty car. And you can see from the interior, we've got battery charging. We've got, you know, kind of a different dual dashboard look to it. So this is going to be really exciting. I think a lot of people are excited or waiting for this to come out. And I think this is going to convert a lot of people into EV drivers because, again, questions of range anxiety in a car like this, similar to the Lotus conversation we had last week, range anxiety doesn't exist here. This is a toy. This is a car that's going to get from, you know, point A to point B. It's going to be driven on Sunday. Very rarely will a car like this be used on a cross-country road trip. It just has a different set of expectations, and that instant torque, that, you know, hand of God into your stomach when you put your foot down on the accelerator, that's what people are going to want out of this car, especially in the States where top speed is kind of meaningless. This is going to be the way to go.
Yeah, it's not. I don't have anything to add. It's a
well,
hot
I will
electric
add
sports
this.
car.
There's another Porsche story. You know, the Porsche Taycan has been a phenomenal car to sort of champion the cause of electric vehicles for Porsche fans. 2 years ago, they did the cross-country rally where the Porsche Taycan went from coast to coast in the United States and only stopped for about 2 hours and 40 minutes to charge. But now they have a new high-altitude record, the Porsche Taycan Gran Turismo, or Cross Turismo rather, which was the shooting brake wagon version of it. They set an EV altitude record, taking this thing up into like the Atacama Desert somewhere for 17,569 feet. That is the highest that any EV has been driven so far under its own power. And it just looks awesome. I love this thing. And, you know, it's funny, we started off this show talking about cars that were built to look like they were going to go off-road, but probably didn't have the capability. If you showed me this car and said, these guys are going to take it 18,000 feet up the side of a mountain, I would have said, no way. It's got the wrong tires. It's way too low.
Yeah.
This is not the car for that. And here they are. So good for them.
Yeah, there's something like just looking at it, my brain is like, this is not right. This is not right. This is not right. Something's wrong.
Yeah, they dropped it onto the top of the mountain via helicopter. You know, twin rotor Chinook up there. Take it.
Also, clearly, not all those people were in that one car. This was a circus act.
I was going to say sponsored by PT Barnum. There's 37 more
Yes.
people in the trunk.
But that's awesome that they did it with a Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo at that. I don't know if that was sponsored by Porsche, but it was really
Oh yeah,
impressive.
those are Porsche engineers doing that move. 100%.
It's a very pretty Porsche too. I mean, I still think that is the prettiest car on the road.
Oh yeah, EV or otherwise, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, EV or otherwise. The Taycan, I like the normal Taycan more than the Turismo, but from the front, it's unbeatable. Are we done with Porsche?
Yeah, we're done with Porsche. Go back to the Ford.
So now we've got a Ford story.
So this is really interesting, right? And I kind of alluded to this when I was talking about the Chinese mini cars. I don't feel like we as Americans have our priorities straight sometimes when it comes to buying cars, because Ford is now developing, they're rolling out a 6x6 kit.
Let's just pause for a second. We started with those tiny delivery and off-road vehicles, and now we're on to this.
Yeah, and Ford is suggesting that they're offering this for F-150 buyers. That's a Mercedes, but you can go to the other ones. That they're going to offer this kit to F-150 buyers who, quote unquote, may occasionally have a need for a higher payload. And like, there is certainly a need for that, right? Like, there are some people who are just going to load up their truck. You know, they work for excavation companies, they work for landscapers, they're hauling sod, they're putting 4 tons of something back there, that an extra set of axles would be beneficial to them. But they don't necessarily want to go the dually route or the F350 or 450 route. But I just don't get this. This is just, you know, I don't get it. I don't understand why you would sell this to an F-150 buyer when you also have the 3/4 ton and full ton versions. But I do have the question as to whether or not this would fit on a Lightning, because I think that there are going to be some 6-wheel Lightnings running around if this is just a direct bolt-on for payload.
Yeah, so that was the question. Will this be an option on the Ford F-150 Lightning? We don't know. And
I mean,
also,
it doesn't
what's
look like a
Ford's next?
drive axle, so it looks like it should just fit right under there.
When is Ford coming out with electric 252? I'm curious about, but that's a different.
Well, they have a 3/4 ton and they have a 3/4 ton electric Transit. So that's interesting. It should be relatively coming soon, but I think it's a question of the market, right? Where if your market is primarily pulling horses or trailers or something like that, that's more long distance. I don't necessarily see that coming. I think there's less of a need for that from the market perspective than there is the vans. But I think that's coming as well. It's just not going to be a while.
Yep. And that's our show for the day. We start with a couple of tiny mini EV delivery and off-road vehicles, and
I
we
feel
end
like
with these
today it
beef.
went fast.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We were quite efficient going through these.
We did good.
Yeah.
We're getting better.
Yeah, I think so. Hope
All
so.
right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll have less socio-political commentary, maybe, unless some crazy socio-political issues come up. And we'll see you then.
Yeah, we don't know what will come up by tomorrow, but see you
It's
then.
the
Cheers.
news.